has always been a maritime civilization, from the Harappan dockyards of Lothal to the great naval traditions of the Cholas and Marathas. And yet, for decades, much of this story remained in the shadows. Today, there is a conscious effort underway to rediscover, reclaim and reassert that legacy. From building the National Maritime Heritage Complex to reimagining the symbols, identity and strategic outlook of the Indian Navy. To help us understand this deeper civilizational and strategic shift, I am joined by someone who has not only served at sea but has also dedicated his life to documenting India's naval history. Commodore Dr. Srikant B. Keshanur. Welcome to New India Junction, sir.
Thank you. Delighted to be with you.
Sir, you've had a long career at sea. You've later worked extensively on naval history. So, why do you believe India, despite having such a rich maritime past, became what many call a sea-blind nation?
Interesting question. As you pointed out, we have a rich maritime past. And certainly you wouldn't have had a rich maritime past if people had not been maritime conscious at that time. Because you see, that maritime past was not simply about a past, it was about a certain prosperity for the country. You know, the 2,500 years back, your forefathers were dealing with countries or regions or peoples of different parts of the world, having exchange of ideas, having commercial and trade exchanges, which gave a lot of prosperity to India. So, there was society, state, people, stakeholdership in maritime. So, it was not simply people on the coast, but people from the interiors where the products moved. There were equivalents of modern day entrepreneurs and investors who were, so it was a whole of society approach to maritime, I believe, that helped India's maritime prosperity and therefore having a great maritime past. Now, this broke at some time around probably 13th, 14th century, when the last of the Cholas or a little after that, there were certain invasions from the north. So, your focus of people and country became on the invasions from land and that continued later. You know, in all this people forgot that you were colonized by the seas. Now, your colonial power, Britain, had a vested interest in keeping you sea blind, because if you became sea aware, then there would be some time in future when you would probably displace them or you would be a threat to them in some foreseeable point of future. So, while they built up a big army and some sort of air force to fuel their colonial ambitions, they had a very small navy, the Royal Indian Navy. So, over a period of time, the country and society turned away from the seas, okay, and that is what caused the phase of sea blindness, as you might call it. Now, immediately after independence, the bulk of your threats and they were existential happened from land. Your wars were fought with your land centric neighbors, though again people forget there that 71 war, the Navy played a big role and I think was instrumental along with the other two services in the surrender at Dhaka. People forget that in 61 Goa liberation, the Navy played a major role, you know. So, I think it is a combination of a certain let us say 400, 500 years of phases when you got cut away from sea, as well as immediate issues facing you after independence that resulted in unfortunate sea blindness.
Sir, how deeply was India's maritime narrative sidelined during the colonial rule?
You know, by the time the colonials came, because of the preceding 300, 400 years, like I said, your colonials started to come. I mean, they came in the 17th century. I mean, the Portuguese came, of course, much before that. I am talking of the British. Okay. 200 or 300 or 400 years had elapsed since your last great maritime empires from the earlier millennia. If you were to look at the Cholas, probably as the last, though they must not be the only ones, because we had a whole lot. Cholas, Pallavas, Pandyas, Cheryas, all of them were great seafarers in one way or one degree or the other. Much before that, the Kalingas were there. So you had already a gap, So it was in some ways easy for the British, who ultimately became your colonial masters, so to say, to erase that. But they also had a kind of, let us say, deliberate vested interest, because the one power they were fighting on the sea to a great stage were the Marathas. And before that, the Portuguese were actively resisted by Kunyali Marakkars. So these were these let us say, two great entities on the Malabar coast and then the Konkan coast who fought. Now the Marathas put up a very valiant fight. In fact, Kanaji Angre overcame or got the better of British in several, battles. And that is not a story they would have liked to have said, because they considered themselves, the entire British Empire was undergirded by their sea power. So they considered themselves to be the supreme masters of seas. So it did not help them to say that, that we were challenged at sea. The second thing, there were other people who were challenging them later. They did not even want to give control of sea transportation. So when Walchand Hirachand used SS Loyalty, we are talking of 1919, okay, when he built the first, not built, but created the entity and built, made SS Loyalty, a ship that took people across continental routes, went all the way to London, taking passengers. That was challenging British monopoly over ocean transportation. So Walchand Hirachand in 1919, before that 13 years, V.O. Chidambaram, who started, steamship company to ferry from Tamil Nadu to Sri Lanka. Okay. Similarly, they were put under lots of pressure, financial, other. There were a lot of efforts made to, to destroy their companies, to frustrate their efforts. So they wanted total control, not just simply over the navies, but shipping route, shipping commerce, trade, everything.
So they crippled the shipping industry as a whole.
Of course they crippled, and there was no domestic shipbuilding. It was only the exigencies of the war, particularly World War II, that then forced them to start doing things in India, building in India, and So for them it was always, and where they use people in inferior ranks. So they did not encourage an officer cadre in the Indian Navy, for example, until much later. The officer cadre in merchant navy, all these were measures that were started after, in fact after 1926, the Dufferin started in I think 1927 or 2027. So officer training started much later. So they had an active vested interest in not reminding you of your great maritime past. They could not keep you totally from your military past, because you had heroes, tales, fighting people on land. They could not erase that completely, and often they use that to motivate their troops, fight for your tradition, fight for your regiment. But as far as Navy and Maritime was concerned, they used India, they exploited India, they kept commerce. I mean, all of Indian produce was going to Britain for making finished products to be sold back to India and rest of the world at inflated prices. So the control over its movement, transportation, okay, coal, if they had to use any fuel, all of that. That is why a huge colonial enterprise was created.
So did that shape how independent India viewed seas in its early decades,
Yes,
if I
of course.
can put it?
Yes, of course it did, because one aspect about the sea is, you must remember, the sea is beyond the horizon. For an ordinary person in India, the sea affects our lives, but we do not live on it. Okay. So, like I keep saying that you can see the army marching on Republic Day, you can see the Air Force planes, but we can't bring ships up the river Yamuna to show to show you know. So, how do people know what do navies do? That is a big problem. You ask an ordinary Indian or any of this one, कि Navy क्या करता है? Often the thing is defend the coast. That is not correct. I mean, that is one part. Actually, navies are meant to protect India's maritime interests. That maritime interest can be anywhere around the world. Your trade and commerce is maritime interest. Today, more than 90% of your trade is seaborne. Your energy flow is through the seas. Okay. Now, this may not look fashionable or sexy. This may not be that हम घर में घुस के मारेंगे, but it is very, very important to a country. It may be for keeping your economy going. Your interest could be in Antarctica, where you have scientific expeditions and stations. Your interest could be the Indian diaspora settled in different parts of the world, who if they are threatened by anything have to be brought back. So, navies have a global role, a regional role, and it is about building influence. It is also about containing various things like piracy, terrorism, what we call as the policing constabulary role. It is about diplomatic role. Navies, I say, a very important, with no prejudice to the Army and Air Force, the Navy is more multifaceted. But the problem about being multifaceted is it becomes very difficult to explain this to the policy makers. What do you do? Also, Navy was very small at the dawn of independence. Like I said, the British had deliberately kept the Navy small. So, you were very small, and then you faced threats on land from Kashmir. Okay, you had internal issues in Hyderabad and the rest of the country. The only thing which had a little sea connection was Junagadh, but that got resolved quickly. So, then the Chinese came. So, the budget entirely went towards army development. So, because of that, it took a long time and your economy was growing slowly. So, today as your economy is in leaps and bounds, I mean, you need energy, right? If you are growing at 7, 8, 9, you want to grow at 10%, what is going to fuel that? Energy. Where is the energy going to come from? All over the world, because you are not creating all that yourself. You might want to. Manufacturing, import, export, goods, global supply chains, all of that is undergirded by safe seas, secure seas, and Navy plays a huge role in that. And growing navies like Indian Navy, blue water navies like Indian Navy have to play an important role in that. So, yes, that was the answer to your question. These things took time to realize, and therefore, also that little bit of sea blindness, or call it the benign neglect of seas or whatever, continued for a while until it started to change later.
So, there are two very interesting points that you made, and I don't know which one to touch upon first, so I will leave that to you. One is the 1971, since we were talking about Kashmir's invasion, and then the Chinese invasion happened, and then I think another 5 years, 8 years down the line, we had 71 happening. So, earlier, like when we started off, you mentioned that Navy played a very crucial role. So, I would want you to touch upon that, and then number two, the thought that comes to my mind is, you said that there's not much naval action that people get to see, but in the last couple of years what we have seen is a lot of things happening in the, say, Gulf and the Arabian Sea. There have been piracy attempts, there have been a lot of rescue ops, and I think Indian Navy has been part of that. So, I would want you to highlight that as well, because I think with the advent of social media and a lot of visuals now going viral, we saw heroic action happening right there, where we have rescued, and I think there was a Royal British Navy, some tanker that was involved. So, I'll want you to touch upon that. So.
Yeah. I'll touch upon both, so necessarily the answer will be a little long, but 71 war. Now, this is important because, of course, in many ways it was a time when all the three services operated in great unison, the political diplomatic apparatus came together. But the Indian Navy, I call 1971 Indian Navy's finest hour in many ways. And why? Because we operated in two different theatres of action in the Arabian Sea and the Bay of Bengal, and we did significantly different and distinct things there. Now, in the Arabian Sea, we launched these attacks on Karachi, Operation Trident and Operation Python. On the 4th of December, as war dawned, small missile boats of Indian Navy in a daredevil attacked Karachi, and two, three of their important Navy ships, a ship that was giving ammunition to them, were destroyed or sunk. Their oil refinery was set on fire, the Kemari oil refinery in Karachi. On the very first day, we landed a killer blow, and they did not expect this because these were small ships, meant small boats, you could say, that were meant for local defense. The Indian Navy, through fantastic tactical innovation, used these boats to launch an attack that was unexpected. Unexpected in intensity and depth. On the 8th, we repeated this. Okay. So, after the 8th attack in the West, Pakistan Navy simply got back and did not, उसके बाद उन्होंने they actually de-ammunition, means they sort of kept their ships inside and refused to come out and fight. Ships all over which were going to Karachi started, because meanwhile the Western fleet was had established sea control on the Arabian Sea. All the shipping that was going to Karachi now started taking permission from Indian Navy to go in and operate there. So, we were the masters of the North Arabian Sea at that time. In the east, what happened is that we used the aircraft carrier and its air element, launch a huge amount of attack on Khulna, Mongla, Chittagong, their harbors, port infrastructure, everything, and again virtually sort of decapacitated a whole lot of their infrastructure. Okay. So, they could not move, and the two, as it is, the air corridor was not there because India had shut the air corridor. Now, the sea corridor was shut. So, West Pakistan could no longer supply East Pakistan. Okay. We also had a most important operation called Operation X, and people should know this. The Mukti Bahini water wing, a small water wing was created. They did fantastic action between the 15th of August, before the start of the war. Water wing of the Mukti Bahini, trained by Indian Navy's divers and commandos as they were at that time, they damaged or destroyed more than 1 lakh tons of shipping in the ports of then East Pakistan. So, virtually they had very few rations, very few supplies, ships that were coming in became difficult, insurance prices shot up for anyone wanting to go to East Pakistan, their army could not be sustained, and when the war happened, we choked them so much that now they could not escape from there. That is why you had more than 90,000 prisoners of war. So, the Indian Navy played a major role. Other than that, our submarines were deployed, our aircraft played a huge role. We also lost one ship, the INS Kukri of Diu. This happens in war. We honor the sacrifices of Captain Mahendranath Mullah and the Kukri crew. Okay. So, it was a war in which we were so overwhelmingly victorious at sea that these are studied by other navies, particularly how we used our missile boats and all that. Operation X, as you can, these are studied. We did riverine operations. I mean, the entire range of navies operations या missions जो हम बोलते हैं, we did during this war, and it's not studied.
Exactly. I don't think even I knew about Mukti Bahini's water wing. I think this is the first time, and my viewers will agree too, that this is the first time probably.
Lot of people, you ask who was army chief during 71 war, they'll say the great Sam Manekshaw, of course. But you ask who was the navy chief during 71 war, not many people would know. I mean, there was a equally remarkable Admiral Nanda who was very aggressive, very sort of, let's say, he had that great risk taking ability to think operationally and all that. So these are stories, that are waiting to be heard, written. I mean, they have been, but they need much greater audiences. Now, therefore, come to what you said second, equally true. While our forces elsewhere have been occupied actively, like I said, the oceans need to be kept peaceful. Now, you have a range of threats at sea, from pirates, from non-state actors, terrorism. Let us not forget that whether it was the 26/11 attacks that came, or before that the RDX that landed in the 90s, they used the sea route to do that. So, the sea always remains a way where a lot of these notorious negative characters operate, and they cooperate much more than countries sometimes are able to cooperate. So, again, not all countries have capacities to handle that. So, India as a regional navy, as a blue water navy, does that. So, in the Northwest Arabian Sea of Red Sea, not just recent piracy, even when piracy reared its head between 2008 to 12, the Indian Navy played a remarkable role. We had probably the highest number of, at one point of time, pirates captured, attacks thwarted or prevented, and ships rescued. So, recently also, about 2 years ago, 2004, particularly from 2023 December to 2024, the first half, you had Operation Sankalp, where all these action was happening in Arabian Sea, as you brought out. We went to the aid of many ships which were hit. We put out fires and damage where other advanced navies were unwilling to go. We went and rescued, put out fishermen in distress who were floundering. We put them back, repaired their ships or fishing boats, and assisted. Most importantly, there was a pirated ship called MV Rowan, where we did a daredevil operation, where one ship, INS Kolkata, and then was constantly sort of shadowing it, knocking it. The moment it came out of Somali waters, we could pursue it. Okay, it was hiding there for some time. We launched our commandos using an Air Force plane to land there.
We saw it. It was
combination. I mean, you are operating at thousands of miles from land to do this operation mid sea. Okay, this is remarkable operation.
That is probably the first time, I think, first time, or maybe like one of in many years, that we saw Marcos in action. We have never really seen them in live action. We've seen training videos.
I mean, you're not supposed to see them too, but yes, you're right. So, these things happen. I mean, the Marcos were involved incidentally in their first avatar as Indian Marine Special Force in Sri Lanka operations also, in Op Pavan. That's another operation, but that's the point. Navy stories are not known because they happen beyond the pale of land and beyond the horizon. So, yes, all these.
So, since we were talking about decolonization, so like when we talk about decolonizing in the Navy, we talk about the colonial past. Now we are touching upon decolonization. So, in the Navy, what does it truly mean? Will it be about symbols? Will it be about doctrine? Will it be about mindset, or all three?
See, in a sense, it would be about all three. I would of course argue that this thing has been happening continuously. We must remember one thing, and I have just now spoken about the ill effects of colonialism in great detail. That having been said, since Britain was the best navy and the imperial power for much part of the last 150 years, our initial leaders were those who had trained during World War II times with the Royal Navy and in Britain. So, in some senses they had trained in the best training ground, because you are trained with the best navy in the world at that point of time. Now, obviously, naturally, as an outcome of that, your thinking tended to think along the lines that they did. I am talking of doctrinally, not culturally. Culturally is a small issue. Culturally, it was about various other aspects. But it must be said to the credit that each one of them after independence worked towards a strong India's Navy that was Indian Navy. We created a plans paper just 10 days after independence on the 25th of August 47, if I remember right, where we did not be modest कि हम सिर्फ coastal mindset होगा, ये होगा, कहाँ करेंगे. There we talked of aircraft carriers, and then subsequently in the next paper we talked of submarine. We talked of having 2 aircraft carriers immediately followed by 4. In 47 you are talking of your ambitions to be a blue water navy, to have submarines, to have a, जबकि हम मतलब 1000 tons का सबसे बड़ा जहाज था उस वक्त. Okay, and within 15 years we got the Vikrant, which was at about 17,000-18,000 tons, a country that had never had an aircraft carrier. Just within 15 years after independence, and initially when the navy ships used to visit different parts of the world, they would carry the message of India as a sort of, let us say a role model in this part of the world. So, the thinking of decolonization was constant. Like for example, in 1960, we started our warship building initiative. Not many people know, we began so long back. Atmanirbharta began then as far as Indian Navy is concerned. In 1960, we built the first small ship, INS Ajay. By now, we have built so many. I mean, now every ship that is being built is Indian designed and being built in India. So, these steps followed continuously. Of course, in a system like Navy, then training happens. We established a lot of training establishments in Kochi, so that जो UK में training होता था, वो सब धीरे धीरे we started doing in India. So by about 60s, the bulk of our training, 50s they used to go abroad. By about 60s, the bulk of your training started in India. Coming to doctrine, over the last let us say 25-30 years, the Indian Navy has stressed so much on doctrinal development and thinking, because one of the things of course is that doctrine and tactical development, you are greatly influenced by those who have, in anywhere. I mean, you talk of IT, you talk of anywhere, we see what is already existing knowledge produced, So, doctrine development is largely about knowledge production, having your own system, indigenous system of knowledge. So, that probably last 30-40 years, though there were great thinkers before that. Admiral Chatterjee, for example, our third Navy chief, who thought a great deal about how we should have this one. Admiral Soman, the second Navy chief, wanted Atmanirbhar Navy. Admiral Katari, who put the systems in place of it. Admiral Nanda, who was aggressive Navy chief in 71 war. So, each one of them not only wanted a strongly nationalistic Navy, but they also wanted Navy to find a place amongst people's reckoning. So, this doctrine development has undergone a major impetus in the last 20-25 years, where now we write our own doctrines, and these have been very well received globally. So, when the Indian Navy writes its maritime strategy document, maritime doctrine document, okay, then these kind of let us say are seen by the world as a growing Navy's ambitions. Then we also established institutions like the National Maritime Foundation, the Maritime History Society, to aid in the knowledge production about our maritime issues. The thing though is that in a country like India, you need to do a lot more regarding many of these, So, that is there, and cultural symbolisms happen, but they have to keep pace with the times, they keep changing. Fashions change, norms change, how you used to eat, drink, what food you eat, how you talk, how you address. I guess over 70-75 years, in any field they will change, and then they keep pace with time. So, I think, my point is, the Indian Navy has been started to decolonize itself from day one. It's been a progressive journey with everyone contributing to it with certain impetus, over the last few years.
In particular, in 2022, like the insignia was changed. It was like I think St. George's Cross was given up. And then, so what I would want to know is from a historical and psychological standpoint, does it have any impact? How significant is this?
It is significant because the St. George's Cross was an imperial symbol, whatever it was. the first attempt to start changing the St. George's Cross and having our own ensign, so to say, actually to my mind, if I know right, began in the late 70s or 80s with some people proposing a new ensign. Various designs came and all that, but for reasons, various reasons, they did not happen. Then around 99, 2000, if I remember right, we did away with St. George's Cross. This is the first time we did. Okay. And then we replaced it with another ensign. That ensign though was just white with blue stars. The flag did not came to be seen clearly at sea, because one of the things about a flag is you need to see it clearly at sea. Therefore, the cross came back. You did not call it St. George's Cross anymore, because it had a Ashoka, this one on it. It came back to have a more recognizable. Now in 2022, you have the Maratha seal there, the octagonal this one. So that of course is significant, because the Marathas were a great navy. You are recognizing your forebears, and at the same time you are also having a distinctive ensign. So I certainly think it's important, it's inspirational, but all our maritime past people inspire us. We have a building called the Chola building in Goa, in the Naval War College, at the seat of learning. So the Cholas are recent heroes, the Marathas. We have establishment called INS Kunjali after the Kunjali Marakkars, INS Angre after Kanoji Angre, the great admiral, INS Netaji Subhash, INS Sardar Patel. So our heroes, both of the past and more recent vintage, inspire us. They are our maritime heroes.
Sir, in recent years, we have seen efforts to revive maritime consciousness in the country, from say Vision Mahasagar to indigenous shipbuilding to heritage projects as well coming up and already under construction. So, do you see this as a structural shift in India's thinking?
There are 2 or 3 important structural points. You mentioned Mahasagar. Before that was Sagar, articulated by the Honorable Prime Minister in Mauritius in 2015. And I see Sagar as a fantastic, great declaration, because it talks of security and growth. So we are recognizing that it is no longer bread versus gun, but bread and gun. That you need security for progress for all. So we did not leave out anyone, and we specified in the region. So there was, in this wonderful encapsulation, there was a certain grand vision, and it fitted in wonderfully into the Navy, which saw itself operationally as the preferred security partner and first responder in the largely in the Indian Ocean region, though sometimes in the Indo-Pacific too. So it fitted in very well. It gave us a grand overarching vision, which has helped a lot of our let's say our doctrine writing, our operational philosophies, things like mission based deployment and all that, many emanate from that. Now we have moved a step ahead from that to Mahasagar, which was, I think, mutually and holistically advanced or whatever, which now talks of taking this partnership and collaboration further. So when you have the events like the International Fleet Review, when you have Navy steering forums like the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium or the Goa Maritime Conclave, the Navy is becoming an active catalyst in enabling India to have international partnerships. जैसे हम Solar Alliance बोलते हैं, Global South बोलते हैं, but we underrate in normal narratives the great role that Navy is playing in contributing to our equities at the international level and helping our diplomatic efforts. So both the vision of Sagar and Mahasagar did that. Other way where it was, this one was obviously in your maritime heritage. So I think all our events, functions, big ticket things now talk lot more about your maritime heritage. Trans-ocean sailing to Oman by INSV Kaundinya is one of those, but many things, whether it is the Lothal museum that's going to come up where Navy is playing a big part, whether it is the development of our own ocean sailing ecosystem. See, we started sending sailors, people to sail around the world, circumnavigate on a sailing boat. Till 2008 we didn't have a single person. In less than 20 years we have 10 people who have gone around, you know. So we are, and now as we speak there are 6 women officers from all the 3 services who are doing it. So we have created this wonderful ecosystem where sailing, adventure, heritage, all that is coming together, adding to your operational juggernaut, so to say. So the Navy is itself now showcasing the holistic nature of India's maritime past.
So you had mentioned about INS Kaundinya. So we saw some glorious visuals of this stitch ship that started sailing from India, went to the Gulf of Oman. It has started its voyage back to India. So what do you have to say about this part of history? We have just read about or probably seen this picture in some history books.
I think it was a fantastic project and credit must go to all those who were involved. To see a image of a sculpture of a 5th century ship on a cave and then to translate that from the Ajantas to a live design and from that to actually build a ship to illustrate how our forefathers may have sailed. I think that was brilliant in execution, in conception and execution. Of course, credit must go to Mr. Sanjeev Sanyal, who took it upon himself, championed it. Huge amount of credit to the political dispensation who gave it the blessings and go ahead. And of course, for the culture ministry and all that who came in for the funding. The Navy stepped in a great deal to make the shipbuilding possible, because all said and done, converting a image, आपको जहाज बनाने के लिए हर चीज़ का टेक्निकल स्पेसिफिकेशन चाहिए होता है, लैंड, ब्रेड, ड्राफ्ट, ये वो, और स्टिच शिप कैसे बनाने का, बिकॉज शिप्स आर नॉर्मली नेल्ड. द डिफरेंट एस्पेक्ट अबाउट दिस वाज अ शिप. Our ancients used to use coir to wrap around and stitch ships. So the stitch ship technique, so you had certain craftsmen who had to be located. Some of them were abroad, some of them were in India. They had to be brought back. So there was a particular shipbuilder identified in Goa, Prathamesh Dandekar. He was the one who built in his shipyard. Babu Shankran, the master craftsman, got in. The Indian Navy's officers, naval architects, naval constructors got in. IIT Chennai was roped in for the stability trials, and then after it was made, we provided the crew to train and sail it. After all, you need, and this is a different kind of ship. Even sailing wise, those lovely silhouettes and lovely images, of course it looks beautiful, but that's not the way most sailing ships sail these days. So you have to get used to this stitch ship sail, the square sail as it is called, and so we trained our sailors and officers to do this voyage. So I think this is worth a book or a movie, because it's a fantastic project where everything fell in place.
So was every player excited, because it is like recreating our historical past in right in front of our eyes. So every small player, like you mentioned, somebody who was located in Goa, other players, other smaller players, bigger players. So what kind of excitement did you sense when you spoke with them?
Super excitement, because I have written about this. I have gone and visited the shipyard in Goa when it was being built. I have spoken to the people concerned. I was there when Sanjeev Sanyal first unveiled this plan in Bhubaneswar towards the end of 22. So by coincidence, I happened to be at these times. Super excitement all around, and also you need good coincidences for this. Sanjeev Sanyal, at some stage when he was wondering how to do this, he met a Navy officer called Commander Hemant Kumar, who is a naval architect and a constructor, So he told him, why go anywhere else? Let's see if we can do it through the Navy. Of course, Commander Hemant had to sell the idea through his bosses. The Indian Navy came in a big way. I mean, ultimately those pieces got in very, very beautifully. So you need a buy-in from all these sectors. So when I met this master craftsman, Babu Shankran, he can't speak English, he can't speak Hindi, but the excitement on his face was so much about this project. They were doing something like this after years, you know. The shipbuilder Prathamesh Dandekar, his father Ratnakar built those ships with which the solo circumnavigation and circumnavigation was done by Dilip Donde, Tommy and the 6 lady officers, and then the 2 subsequently. But Prathamesh came in to build this, of course with guidance from the father. So, the kind Hodi shipyard as it is called. So, the kind of buy-in from all was superb, the excitement was superb, the desire and zeal, and now the crew that is sailing it. You know, you see the tweets that come on the way up and way down. They know they are a part of mission. You know, we unfortunately in India, we don't give, you know, the first, these sort of people abroad would be considered like Neil Armstrongs or, you know, as people who opened a new frontier. We have heroes in our navy who have climbed mountains, dived in different seas of the world. We have our own, you know, Commodore Molankar, who was the first one to land a LC on an aircraft carrier. These are all, I mean, 24 karat heroes. They need to be written about, spoken about. उनके बारे में अमर चित्र कथा आना चाहिए. So I think this project of Kaundinya is another great Indian success story which needs to be told and spoken about much more. And it is a lesson even for corporates and all. What is leadership? How do you cooperate? How do you do a mission? All that.
So, since you mentioned the National Maritime Heritage Complex that is coming up in Lothal, from what we have seen, it has received quite a lot of attention from the Prime Minister himself. Prime Minister Modi has actually gone to the site and he has often spoken about it. So, do you see this more than a museum? Is it more like civilizational correction?
It is certainly much more than a museum. It is, you know, one is, I was just there 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. So, one is, it is spread over I think almost 400 acres. It has 13 galleries, each of gargantuan proportions. So, like you said, it tells a civilizational story. It is not simply a collection of artifacts or something. It connects us to our maritime past, and the best of technology and all, the best of craftsmen are being utilized as far as the artifacts and storytelling is concerned. But yes, there is a larger vision. Also, that is not the only thing. The entire complex has something called a Maritime Research Institute coming up to act as a kind of mother think tank. It has water bodies to give you that you know, feel of water. It has eco-hotels, it has fantastic amusement, recreation park. So, it's going to be a whole world in itself, in which you know, people are going to experience the grandeur of India's maritime past and how it relates to our present, which is why the Indian Navy's gallery is the largest gallery, you know. So, and the Indian Navy is playing a very active role there in terms of the exhibits at the gallery, and so indeed the Coast Guard. And you have lot of outdoor exhibits of latest warships, planes, stuff like that. So, it is a marvelous blend of the most, beginning with Lothal. Lothal is 2500 before Common Era. So, we are talking of 4,500 years of maritime history. So, that is certainly a civilizational connect. It is emphasizing, you know, we talk of our civilizational connectivity or continuity in different ways through our practices, through our traditions, through our scriptures. But the maritime also, you know, save for those brief portions of sea blindness, when also we had a connect with the seas, but it was not known. This is a continuous story, and I think that it is going to be a fantastic place and every Indian must visit, and the government is sparing no efforts to make even reaching there, you know, by rail, by air, by road, very smooth. So, over the next 2, 3, 4 years, Lothal is going to be the go-to destination for tourists, for maritime interested people, for scholars, for everyone, and I hope it becomes that.
I think all of us are looking forward to it, because from whatever we have seen and read, it already sounds very intriguing, and also the fact that we have not really known about our maritime history as much.
No,
except for the
absolutely. I'm glad
enthusiasts.
you brought that, because when I went there, Heritage Complex is about, I think, a kilometer or so from where the ancient, the world's oldest tidal dock in Lothal was. So, we also visited that place, and in my social media, in my Twitter post, I said that for a maritime man, Lothal is a holy site. ये हमारे लिए एक तीर्थ यात्रा की तरह है. It's a pilgrimage place for us to go to place where our forefathers, our ancestors sailed the seas of the world, and to be on that land and to feel that feeling of excitement and exhilaration is fantastic. So, I share your joy and exhilaration at that, and I hope Lothal becomes really big.
सर, ये तो बात हुई हिस्ट्री की, द डॉक्यूमेंटेशन पार्ट ऑफ इट एंड cherishing our civilization. Now, when it comes to self-reliance, this is something that in the last couple of years has become more visible, and especially clarion calls given by the Prime Minister talking about self-reliance in across all our armed forces. आपने बताया कि पहले भी self-reliance का vision रहा है. So what difference have you seen in terms of say the efforts when it comes to the vigor with which the forces might want to move towards self-reliance, the policy support there, and at the same time in naval manufacturing, like now when we are talking about aircraft carriers, destroyers, submarines, we are seeing a lot more happening. So from that perspective, from a policy support perspective, would you want to throw some light on it, that what has fundamentally changed or shifted, if I may put it like that?
So, you use 2 or 3 words, and I think they are correct to describe it. Lot more momentum, impetus, vigor. You know, like you said, the Navy was pursuing. The Army and Air Force a little less so, with no disrespect to them. There are certain structural issues. The Navy had created structural structures and systems to enable making in India probably a little better. You know, I say this again with caution, little better than the other 2 services. So, it helped us. But on the whole, all the 3 services, the budgetary support, the push, sometimes let us say the active push for the government in terms of the number of items you say these cannot be imported, you know, no import list or whatever. There is much greater vigor towards making it, and I think this was proved during Operation Sindoor both ways, that what you created in India was very good. It could be collaborative like BrahMos or whatever, and what you brought strategically like the S-400 was also important. So, that you had to be clever about what you buy, and you have to be good about what you build. So, both these came out in Sindoor. So, obviously, you will see much greater impetus to that now. But what are the other things? I think 2 or 3 things. There is much greater emphasis on डिज़ाइन एंड क्रिएटिंग इन इंडिया. देखो, मैन्युफैक्चरिंग एक बात है, हम मैन्युफैक्चर कर सकते हैं, हम आप बाहर से लाइसेंस मैन्युफैक्चर भी कर सकते हो, बट कोर इशू होता है डिज़ाइन का, कि आप क्रिएट करो, बिकॉज दैट कैन गेट लॉक्ड एट एनी टाइम. कोर इशू होता है सप्लाई चेन स्टेबिलिटी का. सो हाउ डू यू ensure that? So, as long as you can create, you can manufacture in India, then you are not held to the hostages of makers from abroad. So, I think the emphasis on creating, designing, on software, the source codes, on all of that, that has now got a much greater impetus. Obviously, these will all be works in progress. We are not going to reach there just today, but it is something that has got huge boost. Take for example, the strategic sector of commercial shipbuilding. देखो, there has been a huge boost given to that this year's budget, last year's this one, huge boost to shipbuilding. Why? Because it is not enough for a country's maritime power to have only naval ships and warships. Even today most of our trade happens on ships that are not Indian owned. So tomorrow anyone can stop that anywhere, right? So you need to have lot more ships that are built in India, owned in India, merchant ship. Then you can reuse them, you can do dual use, you can make them as platforms for containers, for amphibious operations, drone operation kara. I mean, the list is endless. So, these sort of things, the ability to think through that. Then small technology, the kind of partnership with medium MSMEs, with small players, with startups, the financial support being given to startups, much more. Civil military fusion, academia, bringing in IITs, bringing in private this one, much more. Though again, this needs to happen at gigantic scale, but these are the sort of things we realize that our academia was doing something, our R&D people were doing something, the users wanted something else. So, that gap has started to close. The Navy itself has something called Naval Innovation and Indigenization Organization, which gives fantastic support to startups. तुम्हारा ये idea है करो. तो पहले ऐसे नहीं होता था, you had to go through the government, file this one, all that. Much of those bureaucratic layers has come down. So, there is an impetus to making in India through different set of players, sub units, assemblies, small parts, you know,
Sir,
because there were lots of things.
Enthusiasm में कोई फर्क पड़ा है when it comes to the forces and probably the participants, like say startups, right? A lot of young lads and ladies out there trying to innovate, and I think at a certain age when you're really young, you are starting up with something, you are really fired up.
Yes.
So the avenue opens up. So मतलब इसमें आपको लगा है कि थोड़ा change?
I would think so. I was just recently 2 weeks ago in Hyderabad for some leadership talk. Two of my fellow panelists were people who have put lots of time in the defense industry, and they say the quantum of support, lots of young people now enthusiastic about taking it. IITs, other institutions, the RECs, you know, good engineering colleges, they have been told. And I see, you know, during the India Maritime Week that happened in October, end of October last year in Bombay, there are lots of people, you know, that was not Navy connected, it was maritime world connected. Lots of young people I met who wanted to develop some things in as far as science and technology, bridging the gap is concerned. So, they had bright ideas. I mean, very young people, fresh out of college, humko ye karna hai, wo karna hai. So, certainly there is that energy. We have, I mean, a couple of, I know there's a Sagar Defense Engineering Group. I mean, they're doing some fantastic work with the Navy. I've seen them, you know, seen as in I've not visited the factory, but just reading about them, seeing what they do, they grow. It's become so fantastic, and there are many such. You know, it's not correct for me to take names because I have no business interest with any of these. You know, but I'm trying to suggest that the smaller players are growing. And bigger players like say L&T, Mahindra and all that are also probably seeing greater volumes. So, though again I have not seen their balance sheets, I would think that we are at a very good place as far as, and this would not have happened without policy changes, you know. So, I think we are at a very good place as far as defense manufacturing is concerned. This is a long way to go. I mean, if you look at what China is doing and all that, we have lots to do to catch up. Second, we must concentrate on the work and not on the hype. No, that's important. India needs results. You know, the one part, little bit of this one is okay, but we need.
Where does India stand as a maritime power when we look at it from a strategic point of view?
I think India stands in a good position as a maritime power, though of course as a maritime person I would want it to become a much bigger power. The area that we call Indo-Pacific or Indian Ocean, interestingly because it is related to maritime history, our ancients at one point of time had relations with areas in Rome and Greece to the west and as far east as Korea and Japan and China. So, and with Africa and of course, the Arab nations or Gulf nations and Southeast Asia. So, what you call today Indo-Pacific, our ancestors have been over those places, and I consider it important to emphasize that because I want to say we have been here for a longest time. There is this very wonderful phrase that Indian Navy Admiral when they encountered the British sometime, I think in the late 90s, in the Arabian Sea, the British task force asked the Indian Navy, "Good morning Indian Navy," over the walkie talkie, and said, "How long have you been here?" So, the Indian Navy admiral answered back saying, "We have been here before Christ, what about you?" You know, that is a brilliant way to make a statement. It is a fantastic way to make a statement. These are our waters, so to say. We are not saying they are only our waters, but the fact that there is an ocean named Indian Ocean talks of India's centrality, historical antiquity and geographical centrality in this ocean. So, today again it has become the center of geopolitical contestation. Lots of things are happening, and India has to play an important role both by virtue of its location and by virtue of the fact that it has a navy that is able to respond to so many of the crises. Yes, you have global navies and they play their role, but you are the navy that is right here right now, which is China is a factor. They are coming in, and you know, increasingly they want to be seen, and that is a part of their global ambition to be seen as an Indian Ocean power too. So, because there are certain set of complications and complexities with China on land, you have to look for them in sea, because particularly because of possibilities with Pakistan too. We can't hide away or run away from that. But having said that, I think geographically we are still well located. Our fleet strength is good. Of course, we need to do more, and we need to build up other vectors of maritime power some more. Shipping, fishing, ocean science and technology, diving, offshore exploration. Yes, we need to have them grow much more to become a good maritime power. But let us not forget our primacy in Indian Ocean affairs.
So, my last question will be, if this kind of maritime push continues, so what could a truly maritime conscious India look like by 2047?
See, I would want that by 2047, as we say, that it becomes blue, nila, nila, blue water, you know, this one, everywhere around we are recognized as a formidable maritime power, but also something that blends with our larger civilizational ideas, cultural connect, that we are a fantastic professional navy, at the same time espousing the best values and virtues of India. That is what I would want to see maritime India and Indian Navy as. The old saying I would want it is ki Samudra Bharat hi Samruddha Bharat hai. So, I think I would like India to be that.
Thank you so much for joining us. It has been a great discussion, and I think our viewers learnt a lot from this. I did, and it was wonderful having you here.
Thank you. Pleasure is entirely mine. You are delightful to talk with, and I think you are able to have a very wide ranging conversation over many topics. Thank you so much.